My name is Elena Ruiz. I was 34 the day my mother canceled my son's surgery fundraiser. It was a Thursday morning. Rain tapped the church windows. I was counting cash donations at the folding table near the back wall of some St. Agnes Hall. $20 bills, 250s. A handwritten note from someone who only signed for Mateo. Then my sister walked in smiling. She dragged a pink suitcase behind her. I remember the sound first, the wheels clicking over tile, slow, casual, like nothing was wrong. My mother stood beside her holding airline tickets, and everyone clapped. What they did not know was that I had already seen the bank transfer at 2:13 that morning. $12,400 moved out of the surgery account. I did not scream. I folded the donation envelope carefully, put it inside my purse. Then I texted Mateo's surgeon one sentence. Please do not cancel Friday yet. What my parents discovered 3 days later destroyed everything they thought was safe. If you have ever been told to stay quiet for family, this story is for you. The first person to arrive was Mrs. Delgado. She carried 2 foil trays of baked ziti through the church doors at exactly 8:14 a.m. I remember because I checked my phone when she hugged me too tightly and whispered, "How's my brave boy doing?" People always lowered their voices around sick children, even when the child was not there. Still Friday, she nodded slowly, like Friday itself was dangerous. St. Agnes Hall smelled like coffee and bleach. Folding tables lined the walls. Someone had taped blue balloons near the donation table, though half had already sunk toward the floor overnight. My son Mateo would have laughed at them. He thought sad balloons looked drunk. I kept thinking about that while arranging raffle tickets into straight piles. Little thoughts become important when you are terrified. Mateo's surgery was scheduled for Friday morning at Riverside Children's Hospital, open heart surgery, severe valve repair. Estimated cost after insurance, $18,640. I knew the number by memory. Not because I wanted to, because every doctor repeated it differently. Some sounded apologetic, some sounded practiced doctor. Levin always sounded tired when he explained it, like he hated saying prices out loud in front of mothers. The fundraiser had started as my mother's idea. She needs help, she told everyone at church, and Mateo deserves a chance. She cried when she said it too. That mattered later, because fake people usually fake everything. My mother did not, that made it worse. By 9 a.m., the hall was full enough to sound alive. Metal chairs scraped floors, coffee cups clicked against tables. Children ran near the raffle baskets while exhausted parents pretended not to notice. My father handled the grill outside. My mother floated between groups, touching elbows and shoulders, thanking everyone personally like she was hosting a wedding. And my sister Vanessa arrived an hour late, dragging a pink suitcase behind her. The wheels clicked across the tile floor. Click, click, click. People turned toward the sound automatically. Vanessa smiled like she had just walked into a party. She wore oversized sunglasses even indoors, white sweater, gold earrings, fresh nails. Her phone tucked under her chin while she laughed at something nobody else could hear. Then she saw me. "Oh my God," she said, ending her call. "You started already." I looked at the suitcase. "You going somewhere?" She hesitated only 1 second. But I noticed it. "Just later," she said. "Nothing important." My mother appeared beside her almost immediately, too quickly, like she had been watching for the question. "She deserves a break," Mom said softly. "It's been a hard year." Vanessa's divorce had finalized 4 months earlier, messy, expensive, public. I nodded once, no argument, but something tightened in my stomach anyway, because my mother avoided my eyes after saying it. That was new. By noon, the fundraiser had raised more than expected. People were generous when children were involved, especially sick children with photographs taped beside donation jars. Mateo hated that photo. His hospital bracelet showed. "You picked the worst one," he told me earlier that week. "You look cute." I look kidnapped. I laughed then. Not now. At 12:43 p.m. I stepped into the empty kitchen behind the hall to count cash deposits before the second crowd arrived. That was when I noticed the envelope was missing. Not all of them, just one. The large white envelope containing the previous night's electronic transfer confirmations from the fundraiser account. I froze beside the metal counter. I remembered placing it there myself. Under the church receipt book, I checked twice, then 3 times. Nothing. My hands went cold. Not panic yet, just awareness. Like hearing glass crack in another room. I walked back into the hall slowly. My father stood outside flipping burgers. Vanessa laughed near the raffle baskets with 2 women from church. My mother carried coffee cups toward Father Ben near the entrance. Normal. Everyone looked normal. That bothered me more. I approached my mother quietly. "Did you move the account envelope?" Her smile flickered. "What envelope?" "The transfer papers." "Oh." She adjusted the coffee cups carefully. "I put them in my purse for safekeeping." "For what?" "So nobody would lose them." Reasonable answer. Perfectly reasonable. But she did something strange after saying it. She touched my wrist. Not comforting, steadying. Like she needed me calm before I even reacted. "I'll give them back later," she said softly. Then she walked away before I answered. I stood there watching her disappear into the crowd. And for the first time all morning, I noticed my father kept checking his phone every few minutes. Not messages. Bank app posture. Thumb scrolling. Jaw tight. I knew because I had spent weeks doing the same thing, watching numbers decide my son's future. 3 hours later, the fundraiser ended. Total raised including online donations, $21,387. Enough. Actually enough. People hugged me while tables folded around us. "You can breathe now," Mrs. Delgado whispered. I almost believed her. Vanessa disappeared around 4:10 p.m. with the suitcase. My mother said she had an early flight. "For where?" I asked. "Arizona." "What's in Arizona?" "A resort near Sedona," Vanessa answered herself from the doorway. 3 days only, 3 days. I stared at her. "My son's surgery is Friday." "I know," she said quietly. Then she hugged me. That part stayed with me longest, because she held me hard enough to feel sincere. "I love Mateo," she whispered into my hair, and I believed she meant it. That was the problem. Outside, rain started again. People carried folding chairs back into storage while my father loaded leftover soda into his truck. The church emptied slowly until only family remained. I helped stack donation boxes near the stage. That was when I heard my parents arguing quietly in the kitchen. Not yelling, whisper fighting, the dangerous kind. "We should tell her now," my father said. "Not here," my mother answered immediately. "She'll see it anyway. After Friday may not be an after Friday." Silence, then footsteps. I moved away from the kitchen before they saw me listening. My pulse hammered once. Hard. But when my parents came back into the hall, both were smiling again. Too quickly. Too practiced. Like actors hitting their marks. Nobody mentioned the argument. At 7:32 p.m., I finally got home. Mateo slept sideways across the couch under his dinosaur blanket. Cartoon sounds flickered softly from the television. His medication bottles sat lined up on the coffee table beside untouched soup. I stood there watching him breathe, one hand over his chest, counting automatically. Parents of sick kids do that without realizing. Count breaths, count pills, count days. I carried the donation bags into the kitchen and opened my laptop to update the fundraiser spreadsheet before sending final numbers to the hospital billing office. That was when I noticed the balance looked wrong. Not missing entirely, just lower. By exactly $12,400, I checked again, then again. My throat tightened slowly. The transfer history showed one outgoing transaction processed at 2:13 a.m. No note attached, no authorization yet, just the amount, $12,400. My hands rested on the keyboard for a long time. I did not call anyone. I did not cry. I opened the account activity page again and stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Then I noticed something else. The destination account ended in numbers I recognized. My mother's account. What I did not know yet was why the transfer happened before the fundraiser had even ended, or why my parents seemed terrified I would discover who else already knew. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I sat at the kitchen table until after 2 a.m. With the laptop open beside Mateo's medication chart. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. Every few minutes I checked the transfer page again, expecting the numbers to change somehow. They never did. $12,400. Transferred at 2:13 a.m. destination account ending in 4428. My mother's account At 2:41 a.m., I finally called the bank fraud line. The woman who answered sounded exhausted. "Mom," she said after verifying my identity. "The transfer was authorized from a recognized device." "Whose device?" "I can't disclose that over the phone. Can you tell me if it was mine?" A pause. No. That single word changed something inside me. Not panic, direction. Because accidents happen, mistakes happen. But someone had logged in intentionally, someone close. I thanked her calmly and hung up. Then I opened my contacts and stared at my mother's name for almost a full minute. I never pressed call. Instead, I drove. At 3:18 a.m., I parked outside my parents' house on Linden Street. No lights downstairs, only the kitchen light glowing faintly near the back window. Someone was awake. Rainwater slid slowly down my windshield while I watched the house I grew up in. I almost left twice. Part of me wanted an explanation simple enough to forgive. Maybe the transfer bounced temporarily. Maybe Dad moved the money by mistake. Maybe Vanessa needed emergency help and they panicked. Families survive panic. Families do not survive choices. Inside the house, a shadow crossed the kitchen. My mother. She stood at the sink holding her phone against her chest, not using it, just holding it. Then my father entered the room. He looked angry. Even through the window I could tell. He said something sharp. My mother shook her head immediately. Then she noticed headlights outside. Mine. Both of them froze. For a second nobody moved. Then my mother smiled. Even from 30 feet away I saw it happen. The performance and smile. The one she used before church events and funerals. I stepped out of the car slowly. Cold rain soaked my sweater almost instantly. Mom opened the door before I reached the porch. "Alina," she said softly, "why are you here this late? I saw the transfer." Her face did not change. That scared me more than anything. Behind her, my father turned away toward the kitchen counter. "We were going to explain tomorrow," Mom said. "What is there to explain? It's temporary." "How temporary?" She folded her arms tightly. "Vanessa needed help. I laughed once, not because it was funny, because my body needed air. She took Mateo's surgery money." "No," Mom said quickly. "Don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" My father slammed something onto the counter behind her. A coffee mug. "You're being dramatic," he snapped. That word landed harder than shouting. Dramatic. Like I was overreacting to missing surgery money. Mom shot him a warning look immediately. "Elena," she said calmly, "the resort reservation was non-refundable. Vanessa already paid part of it. We only borrowed the money for 3 days." I stared at her. 3 days. Exactly the length of the trip. "Borrowed," I whispered. "She's been depressed. My son needs heart surgery, and he will still get it." Mom stepped closer like she was approaching a frightened animal. "The hospital deadline isn't until Friday morning. The transfer back will clear before then." I looked past her at my father. He still would not meet my eyes. That mattered. Because Dad always defended himself loudly when innocent. Silence from him was rare. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked quietly. Mom answered too fast. "Nothing." Another lie. Small, but obvious. I knew her rhythms. She tucked hair behind her ear whenever she lied quickly. She did it now. The same motion she used when I was 12 and asking where birthday money went after Dad lost his job. I suddenly felt 12 again, standing in kitchens full of partial truths. "I want the money back tonight," I said. "That's impossible." "Then cancel her trip." Mom's face hardened for the first time. "It's already paid for, with Mateo's money, with family money," she corrected softly. That sentence sat between us heavily. Family money, not Mateo's, not mine. The fundraiser suddenly sounded different in my head. All those stitches, all those tears. I realized my father still held his phone tightly in one hand, screen downward, like he did not want me seeing notifications. "Who else knows?" I asked. "No one," Mom answered. Dad looked up instantly. "Just 1 second." But it was enough. Someone else knew. "What changed?" I asked suddenly. Both of them blinked. "The surgery was covered yesterday," I continued. "You were crying at church yesterday. Today the money disappears." "What changed?" Nobody answered. Rain hit the porch roof in slow, heavy drops. Finally, Mom sighed. "We thought we had more time." Time for what? The question formed immediately in my mind. But before I could ask, my father's phone buzzed. He looked down automatically. I saw the sender name before he turned the screen away. Dr. Levin, Mateo's surgeon. My stomach dropped. "Why is the doctor texting you?" Dad stood abruptly. It's nothing. That's my son's doctor. He contacted us earlier, Mom said carefully. Why? Silence again. Then Dad muttered something under his breath. Mom closed her eyes briefly. What did he say? I asked. He wanted payment confirmation. And Mom swallowed. We told him there might be a delay. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. You called the hospital? We were trying to help. No, I whispered. You were managing me. That sentence changed the room. I saw it immediately. Mom's calm cracked slightly. Dad finally looked ashamed. Because it was true. This was not panic anymore. It was planning. And planned betrayal feels colder than anger ever does. I should have screamed then. Thrown something, demanded answers. Instead, I sat down slowly at the kitchen table I grew up eating cereal at as a child. The familiar wood grain made everything feel unreal. My mother placed a mug of tea in front of me automatically. Habit. Love still lived inside her movements. That made it harder. You really think I'd let Matteo lose surgery money for a vacation? Vanessa asked suddenly from behind me. I turned sharply. She stood halfway down the stairs wearing gray sweatpants and no makeup. Smaller somehow, younger. I had not even known she was home. You're not in Arizona? No. She looked confused, then worried. My mother stood up too quickly. Vanessa, go, what's happening? Nobody answered. Vanessa looked between us slowly, then at me. Alina. I studied her face carefully. No guilt. No performance. Just confusion and fear. A new thought entered my mind then, terrible, sharp. What if Vanessa was not the one using the money? What if the vacation story itself was the lie? Dad suddenly grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm done with this conversation. Where are you going? Mom asked. For air. But his hands were shaking. I did not ask why. Not then. 3 days earlier, I thought my family was helping save my son. By sunrise, I was no longer sure what they were trying to protect. I went to work the next morning like nothing had happened. That sounds strange now. But people do normal things when their lives start breaking apart. They answer emails, buy groceries, fold laundry. The brain protects itself with routine. At 8:05 a.m., I unlocked the pharmacy counter at Miller Family Drug Store and counted prescription bottles with steady hands. Inside, I was replaying every sentence from my parents' kitchen. We thought we had more time. Time for what? At 9:17, my phone buzzed. Dr. Levin. I stared at the screen before answering. Hi, I said quietly. Elena. His voice sounded careful. I wanted to check on the payment issue. Even doctors softened words when children were involved. I'm handling it, I said. A pause, then, are you? That question irritated me instantly. Yes. Another pause. Your father seemed concerned yesterday. I froze. He called you. He requested postponement options. The pharmacy around me disappeared for a second. What? He said there were complications financially. My grip tightened on the counter edge. Did he cancel anything? No, Dr. Levin said quickly. Not officially. Officially. I hated that word immediately. But he continued slowly. I need honesty from you right now. If Friday is unstable financially, we need to discuss alternatives today. Not Friday morning. My chest hurt. Not emotionally, physically. Like panic had weight. I'll fix it, I whispered. Dr. Levin lowered his voice. Elena, is Matteo safe with the people managing this fundraiser? That question stayed with me long after the call ended. Because doctors do not ask questions like that casually. At 10:42 a.m., I made my first decision. I left work early, not to confront anyone, to verify. There is a difference. I drove straight to my parents' house using the spare key Mom forgot I still had from years ago. Their cars were gone. Dad worked mornings at the hardware warehouse. Mom volunteered Wednesdays at St. Agnes. The house stood silent. I entered slowly. The familiar smell hit me first. Lemon cleaner and old wood. Home, or what used to feel like home. Nothing looked unusual downstairs. The same framed family photos. Same crocheted blankets. Same antique clock ticking near the dining room. Normal houses hide terrible things well. I started in the kitchen. Bills stacked beside the microwave. Grocery receipts. Church donation flyers. Then I noticed something odd. A yellow legal pad beside the refrigerator. My father's handwriting. 3 amounts written repeatedly. 12,400, 7,800, 4,200 below them. Friday deadline. I took a photo immediately. Then footsteps sounded upstairs. I froze. The house went silent again. Probably pipes. Probably nothing. Still, my pulse quickened. I moved carefully toward my father's office near the back hallway. The door was closed, locked. That was unusual already. Dad never locked doors inside the house growing up. His philosophy was always simple. If family can't enter, something's wrong. I stood there staring at the brass knob. Then I remembered the desk drawer. 2 months earlier during Sunday dinner, Dad had slammed that same drawer shut when Matteo wandered near it looking for crayons. Too fast, too protective. At the time I ignored it. Now I could not stop thinking about it. The answer had been in that drawer the entire time. I just had not opened it yet. I searched the hallway cabinet until I found the small lockbox where Mom kept spare keys. Same place since I was 15. Inside sat 3 labeled envelopes. Garage, basement, office. My stomach tightened slowly. Why label an office key inside your own house unless something inside mattered? I unlocked the office carefully. Dust floated through narrow sunlight near the blinds. Dad's desk sat against the far wall beside old tax folders and hardware catalogs. Nothing dramatic, no stacks of cash, no obvious evidence. That almost disappointed me. Then I noticed the shredder beside the desk, overflowing, recently used. I crouched beside it slowly. Bank papers, hospital forms, half-shredded envelopes. One piece caught my eye immediately. Riverside Children's Hospital. I pulled the strips free carefully. Another strip showed Matteo's full name. Then another. Procedure postponement requests. My heartbeat became loud, very loud. I pieced together several strips across the carpet slowly like a puzzle. Not complete enough to read everything, but enough. Request submitted by family representative. Potential financial instability. Review after insurance reassessment. Date submitted 5 days earlier. 5 days. Before the fundraiser even happened. I sat back slowly on the floor. The surgery had not almost been delayed. Someone had been trying to delay it already, and they never told me. Outside, a car door slammed suddenly. I jumped hard enough to hit the desk. Someone was home. I stood quickly and shoved the shredded papers into my purse. Front door opened downstairs, my mother's voice. "Elena?" I closed the office drawer instantly without thinking, then noticed it. The bottom right desk drawer, locked separately from the others. My mother called again downstairs. "Elena, are you here?" I should have left immediately. Instead, I tried the drawer once. Locked, I searched the desktop quickly. Pens, receipts, hardware's invoices. No key. Footsteps approached the hallway, fast. I stepped back from the desk just as my mother appeared in the doorway. We stared at each other. She looked at the open office first, then my purse, then the drawer. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked afraid of me. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Looking for the truth. You shouldn't be in here. That's not an answer." Mom closed the office door behind her gently. Not angry, careful, like volume itself mattered. "Elena," she whispered, "please stop digging before this gets worse." That sentence changed everything. Because innocent people say there's nothing to find. Guilty people ask you to stop looking. "What's in the drawer?" "Nothing important." "Then open it." She hesitated too long. I watched tears gather slowly in her eyes, real tears again. "I was trying to protect everyone," she said softly. "From what?" She shook her head immediately. "I can fix this." "You already said that. And by Friday?" Silence. There it was again. Friday. Always Friday. The deadline meant something larger than surgery money. I could feel it now. Mom stepped closer carefully. "You know your father loves Matteo. Then why did he try postponing surgery?" Another silence. Then she reached for my wrist gently. Same motion as before, steadying me, managing me. "Elena, if you knew the full situation, you would understand why we had no choice. No choice." People say that before admitting terrible decisions. I suddenly remembered something Matteo said the week before while drawing at my parents' kitchen table. "Grandpa says hospitals make money by scaring moms." At the time I ignored it. Now I did not. "Did Dad tell you Matteo doesn't really need surgery?" I asked quietly. Mom's face changed instantly. Only 1 second, but enough to terrify me. "What did he tell the hospital?" I whispered. Before she could answer, her phone rang. Dr. Levin's office. We both stared at the screen. Mom declined the call immediately. That scared me more than if she answered. I moved toward the desk again. Mom blocked me. "Elena, stop." What's in the drawer? You don't want to know like this. That was not a denial. Down the street, thunder rolled softly across the neighborhood. Inside the office, neither of us moved. And for the first time, I realized the missing money might not even be the worst thing my parents had done. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. At least that is how it felt later. In reality, only 3 days passed. But fear stretches time strangely. By Thursday morning, the surgery deadline sat less than 24 hours away. Mateo's overnight bag waited half-packed on my bedroom chair beside his stuffed tiger and medication folder. He was drawing astronauts at the kitchen table when I got home from work. "Can people die in space?" he asked casually. Children ask horrifying questions like they are discussing weather. "Sometimes," I answered carefully. He nodded, then kept coloring. "Grandpa says surgery is riskier than they told you." My body went still. "What exactly did Grandpa say?" Mateo shrugged. "That doctors scare moms because scared moms spend money faster." I looked at him for a long moment. How long has Grandpa been saying stuff like that? Since Christmas, maybe. Christmas. 5 months. The room suddenly felt smaller. I turned away before he noticed my expression. Because that meant this was not about one fundraiser, not one transfer. This had been building quietly for months. At 2:16 p.m., my mother called. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "Elena, you already talked," repeatedly. Silence. Then she said something unexpected. "Vanessa doesn't know everything." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. Another partial truth, another carefully measured sentence. "Then tell me everything." Not over the phone. Why not? Because phones create records. The thought hit me immediately. My mother exhaled shakily. "Dinner tonight. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me still wanted an explanation I could survive. At 6:42 p.m., I arrived at my parents' house carrying Mateo's updated hospital paperwork inside my tote bag. Proof, deadlines, reality. Vanessa was already there, sitting barefoot at the kitchen island, drinking wine. No suitcase anymore, no Arizona trip. She looked exhausted. "Hey," she said quietly. Not defensive, not guilty. Just tired. Dad stood at the sink peeling potatoes with violent precision. Mom hovered near the stove stirring soup. Nobody touched. Normal family dinner movements. That scared me now. Because terrible conversations in movies happen loudly. Real ones happen beside soup. "I canceled the trip," Vanessa said first. I looked at her carefully. "When?" "Yesterday morning." "Before or after you learned about the transfer?" Her face tightened instantly. "After." At least she was honest. Mom set bowls on the table too quickly. "We're not here to attack each other." "No?" I asked calmly. "Why are we here then?" Nobody answered immediately. Dad finally sat down heavily. "The money's coming back tonight." "How?" "I handled it." Another vague sentence. I opened my tote bag and slid printed hospital forms across the table. "Doctor Levin says someone requested postponement 5 days before the fundraiser." Silence. Vanessa looked sharply toward our father. "What?" Dad rubbed his forehead slowly. "It was precautionary." "For what?" "Surgery wasn't necessary yet." My pulse spiked instantly. "There it is," I whispered. Mom closed her eyes. Dad looked annoyed now instead of ashamed. "You're acting like I'm trying to hurt him. You interfered with my son's surgery." I asked questions. "You contacted the hospital behind my back." "Because nobody else was being rational." The room went still. That sentence changed the atmosphere completely. Because until then, they were defending money. Now they were defending belief. "You think Mateo doesn't need surgery?" I said quietly. Dad sighed heavily like I was exhausting. "I think hospitals rush procedures constantly, doctor." Levin said delaying could damage his heart permanently. "He also drives a Mercedes." Vanessa stared at him. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Dad ignored her completely. "I raised 3 kids without trusting every doctor who wanted money." "This isn't antibiotics for a cold," I snapped. "His valve is failing." Dad's voice stayed calm. Too calm. "That's what they told you." My chair scraped backward loudly as I stood. "There it is," I repeated. Mom grabbed my wrist immediately. "Elena, sit down." "No, please." I looked down at her hand, shaking. She was terrified of this conversation reaching its final shape. "What's in the drawer?" I asked suddenly. Dad froze. Only for half a second. "Enough." Vanessa looked between us in confusion. "What drawer?" No, Dad said sharply, too sharp. Mom whispered, Frank, what drawer? Vanessa repeated louder now. I watched my father carefully. Calm men become dangerous when control slips. There's nothing in the drawer, he said. You locked it. It's paperwork. Then open it. No. The answer came instantly, and that instant mattered. Because innocent people hesitate. Guilty people refuse. Vanessa slowly set down her wine glass. What's happening? Nobody answered her. The kitchen clock ticked loudly behind us. Finally, Mom spoke. We borrowed the fundraiser money because your father thought postponing surgery would buy more time. Vanessa blinked. You told me the money was for my trip. It was temporary, Mom whispered. You blamed me? No, sweetheart. You let Elena think I stole surgery money? Mom started crying immediately, real crying again. Dad still looked angry instead of sorry. That difference mattered too. Vanessa stood up slowly. Oh my God, I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt cold, because one detail still made no sense. If Dad truly believed surgery was unnecessary, why hide everything? Why steal money secretly? Why contact the hospital privately instead of confronting me openly? There was still another layer underneath this. I could feel it. Then Vanessa said something quietly that changed the room again. Dad, did you use the fundraiser account to cover your debt? Silence. Absolute silence. My father looked at her sharply. My mother's crying stopped instantly. And suddenly I understood this was the false reveal. Debt. That explained the numbers on the legal pad. 12,400, 7,800, 200. My mind started connecting pieces rapidly. Warehouse problems, late mortgage payments, Dad's missing overtime shifts. Oh my God, I whispered. Vanessa backed away from the table slowly. You said the tax issue was handled. Elena, Mom said quickly, listen to me. How much debt? Dad stood abruptly. Enough. How much? Enough. The shout rattled the silverware drawer. First real explosion yet. Vanessa looked pale now. You used Mateo's fundraiser to pay debt? I was protecting this family. There it is again, I said quietly. Protecting. Dad pointed at me hard. You have no idea what pressure feels like. My son could die Friday, and losing this house would destroy all of us. The words hung there heavily. Mortgage debt, tax debt maybe. Finally something concrete. Finally something ugly enough to explain the panic. For 3 days I thought I finally understood what had happened. I was wrong about one thing, the most important thing. Because while everyone argued, I noticed my mother staring at the hallway, toward the office, toward the locked drawer, and her face still looked terrified, which meant the debt was not the real secret either. Dad suddenly reached for his phone, then stopped. Too late. I already saw the notification preview across the screen. Riverside Children's Hospital payment alerts, not debt collection, not mortgage warnings, hospital alerts. My father noticed me reading it. His expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear this time. And I finally understood something terrible. The surgery itself was connected to whatever waited inside that drawer. 3 days went by. I replayed that dinner every night. Dad shouting, Mom crying, Vanessa realizing she had been used as cover, and that notification from Riverside. Everything pointed somewhere. I just could not see the full shape yet. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Mateo's surgery was supposed to begin at 9:30 a.m. At 7:12, Dr. Levin called. Elena, he said carefully, we need to discuss authorization. I already knew from his tone. The payment had not cleared. I'm coming in, I said. The hospital lobby smelled like sanitizer and burnt coffee. Parents slept folded into plastic chairs. Nurses moved quickly without ever appearing rushed. Mateo sat beside me holding his stuffed tiger against his chest. Do I still get pancakes after? He asked. Yes, I answered immediately. I would have promised him the moon then, doctor. Levin met me near pediatric admissions with a thin folder tucked under one arm. His expression looked wrong, too cautious. We can delay 48 hours, he said quietly. No more. Why? Because insurance flagged conflicting family statements. The sentence barely registered at first. What? He lowered his voice further. Someone contacted both billing and review departments multiple times questioning medical necessity. I already knew who. But then he added something worse. They submitted documentation. My stomach dropped instantly. What documentation? I legally cannot show you yet. Not no, that mattered. What kind of documentation? Dr. Levin hesitated. Then, prior evaluations. A chill moved through me slowly. Prior evaluations, paperwork. Someone had records. Who submitted them? I think you already know. Before I could answer, Matteo tugged my sleeve. Mom. I looked down. His lips looked pale. Too pale. Fear cleared my head immediately. Nothing else mattered first. I knelt beside him. Hey, I whispered. You okay? My chest hurts. Everything inside me tightened violently. A nurse appeared almost instantly after seeing his expression. Within minutes, they wheeled him toward observation, while monitors beeped softly around us. I followed automatically until a staff member stopped me outside the exam area. And suddenly I was alone, completely alone. I sat down hard in one of the hallway chairs and stared at the floor. This was the moment families usually come together. Instead, mine was dismantling my son's surgery from behind my back. At 8:26 a.m., Vanessa arrived, running, hair wet from rain. I came as soon as Mom called. I looked up sharply. Mom called you. She said Matteo was getting worse. I stared at her for a long moment. You really didn't know. About the money, she asked quietly. No. About Dad contacting the hospital? Her face changed instantly. No. I believed her now. That was the tragedy. Vanessa had flaws. Expensive taste, terrible relationships, constant chaos, but she loved Matteo. That part was real. She sat beside me slowly. I found something, she whispered. My pulse jumped immediately. What? She opened her purse and slid folded papers into my hands. Bank statements, Dad's credit lines, past due notices, tax liens. The numbers made me dizzy. $48,000. 19,300. $7,842. Months overdue. You were right, Vanessa whispered. He used the Fundraiser account. I flipped through faster, then stopped cold. One payment stood out. Riverside Children's Hospital. Request. Refund. Not payment. What is this? Vanessa swallowed hard. I found it in Mom's trash yesterday. My heartbeat quickened. The form date was 2 weeks old. Requested reimbursement processings. Patient Matteo amount pending, $18,640. I stared at it. What reimbursement? Vanessa shook her head. I don't know. The hallway suddenly felt too bright, too loud, because now the story changed again. Dad was not only delaying payment. He was trying to access money already connected to Matteo's procedure. But how? What changed? I whispered aloud. Vanessa looked confused. I stood abruptly. The Fundraiser makes no sense anymore. What? If Dad only needed debt money, why interfere with surgery approvals? Why request refunds? Vanessa rubbed her forehead. Maybe he panicked. No. The answer came immediately. This was bigger than panic. Then my phone buzzed. Mom, I answered instantly. Where are you? At home. Why? Silence. Then softly, your father's gone. My chest tightened. What do you mean gone? He left at 6 this morning. With what? Another silence. The office files. The files. The drawer. I stood up so quickly, Vanessa grabbed my arm. What happened? He took something. At that exact moment, Dr. Levin exited the observation room. His expression told me everything before he spoke. Matteo stabilized, he said carefully. But we cannot wait much longer. Relief nearly knocked me sideways. Then he added quietly, Elena, there's another issue. Of course there was. What? He glanced toward Vanessa briefly before continuing. The original diagnostic evaluation submitted by your insurance carrier was signed by a physician who retired 3 years ago. I stared at him blankly. I don't understand. It means someone resubmitted old records recently. Old records, retired doctor. My skin went cold. Dr. Levin continued carefully. We think someone attempted to argue Matteo's condition hasn't progressed, but it has. Yes, he said softly. Significantly, Vanessa whispered. Jesus, I suddenly remembered Christmas again. Dad saying hospitals exaggerated. Mom insisting second opinions took time. The delayed appointments, the repeated paperwork problems. This had started long before the fundraiser, long before the missing money. Then one memory surfaced sharply. 2 years earlier, Dad insisting on handling insurance paperwork because these systems confuse you. My breathing changed immediately. Not fast, controlled, dangerously controlled, because the pieces were finally aligning. Dad did not suddenly panic over debt. Dad had been managing Matteo's medical process for years, quietly, carefully. And if he controlled the paperwork, then the surgery delay might have saved him money somehow, or exposed something. Vanessa looked at me nervously. What are you thinking? I answered honestly. I think Dad's been lying longer than we know. At 10:03 a.m., my father finally called. I answered on speaker immediately. Elena, he said calmly. Too calmly. You need to stop escalating this. My hands shook once, then steadied. Where are the files? That doesn't matter right now. It matters to me. You're emotional. There it was again. That word. Emotional. Dramatic. I suddenly understood his strategy perfectly. Make me sound unstable enough and nobody asks what he did. You forged records, I said quietly. Silence, not denial. Just silence. Vanessa covered her mouth slowly. Finally, Dad sighed. You don't understand medical systems. No, I whispered. I understand my son can't breathe properly. I was trying to avoid unnecessary surgery. With fake paperwork? No fake paperwork. Retired doctors don't sign current evaluations and other. Silence. Then, you need to think carefully before involving police. The hallway went still around me. Vanessa stared in shock. Even Dr. Levin stopped moving nearby. Police. He said police before I did, which meant he already knew what this was. What did you do? I asked softly. Dad exhaled slowly into the phone. Then, for the first time, his voice cracked slightly. I did what fathers do. The line disconnected. I stared at the screen. Vanessa whispered, oh my God, but something still bothered me. One terrible detail. If Dad forged paperwork to avoid surgery, why continue fundraising publicly? Why organize church donations at all? The money trail still did not fit the medical sabotage. And until those two stories connected, I still did not have the full truth. That was a Friday. By Sunday, everything would collapse in front of witnesses. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I had already made my decision. If my father refused to tell the truth privately, I would force it into daylight. Saturday morning began quietly. Too quietly. Matteo slept late after the hospital observation scare. His breathing sounded uneven through the baby monitor beside my bed. Every small sound pulled me awake instantly. At 6:48 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. Elena Ruiz? Yes, this is Karen from Riverside Compliance. Compliance. Not billing, not scheduling. Compliance. My stomach tightened immediately. We need to discuss irregular submissions connected to Matteo's records. I sat upright slowly. What kind of irregular submissions? Can you come in today? I said immediately. Tell me now. A pause. Then carefully. Someone claiming to be Matteo's legal medical advocate submitted amended progression reports over the last 18 months. 18 months. My pulse started hammering. What does that mean? It means records were repeatedly updated to minimize urgency classifications. I closed my eyes briefly. Not one forged form, a system, repeatedly, quietly, over time. Who submitted them? We believe your father. The room tilted slightly. Karen continued, speaking softly like someone approaching an injured animal. There's more. Of course there was. The signatures appear copied from archived physician files. Copied, not mistaken, copied. My father forged medical records. The sentence formed fully in my mind for the first time. And once thoughts become complete, they stop being survivable. I stood slowly and walked into the kitchen before answering again. Why would he do this? Another pause. We think someone was trying to prevent insurance reassessment. That sentence took longer to understand. Then suddenly I did. If Matteo's condition officially worsened, insurance classifications changed, coverage changed, investigations started, deadlines accelerated, and somewhere inside that process, money moved. A terrible possibility entered my mind. What if someone already collected money connected to delayed treatment? Karen went quiet immediately. Too quiet. What does that mean? I pressed. We're still reviewing records. That was not an answer, which meant I was close. At 8:22 a.m., I drove to my parents' house again. This time the office door stood open. The drawer was empty. Files gone. Dad gone. Mom sat alone at the dining room table staring at untouched coffee. She looked 20 years older than Thursday. You need to tell me everything now, I said. She nodded slowly. No resistance left. Then she whispered the sentence that finally cracked the story open halfway. Your father borrowed against the settlement. I stopped cold. What settlement? Her eyes filled immediately. The insurance delay settlement. The room went silent around me. What are you talking about? Mom covered her mouth briefly before continuing. 2 years ago, the hospital missed early progression signs in Mateo's scans. Your father filed complaints. I stared at her. He said they delayed diagnosis. They did, she whispered. How much? She looked away. 30,000. I could not breathe properly for a second. $30,000. Everything inside me rearranged instantly. Dad did not just hate hospitals. Dad discovered compensation money tied to Mateo's condition. And he kept it, I whispered. Mom started crying again. It was supposed to help future treatment. But your father thought surgery could still be avoided. No, not avoided. Delayed. Long enough to use the money first. The realization hit so hard I sat down automatically. Dad had been gambling against time, against Mateo's body, against worsening symptoms. And every delay protected the settlement money from being spent. How much is left? Mom shook her head slowly. I don't know anymore. That answer terrified me, because it meant the money was gone. Not misplaced, gone. Then another thought surfaced. If the settlement existed, why fundraiser publicly? Mom answered immediately this time. Because the money disappeared faster than expected. There it was. Debt, taxes, mortgage, everything connected now. The fundraiser was never the beginning, it was the cover-up. Church donations replacing money already spent. My hands went numb. You let people donate believing surgery wasn't funded. We thought we could replace it in time. We? Mom looked shattered suddenly. Not manipulative anymore, just broken. He promised me he could fix it. That sentence sounded painfully human and horribly familiar. People destroy families while believing repair will come later. What about the forged records? Mom closed her eyes. He said surgery risks were real. That's not an answer. He convinced himself delaying was protecting Mateo. No, I understood now. Dad started with fear, then debt entered, then lies systems, then systems needed protection. That is how ordinary people become dangerous. Not all at once, one compromise at a time. Suddenly, someone knocked hard at the front door. 3 fast knocks. Mom jumped visibly. I opened it. Dr. Levin stood outside. Rain dotted his coat shoulders. For a second, nobody spoke. Then he looked directly at me. We need to move Mateo's surgery to tomorrow morning. What? His latest scans worsened overnight. The words landed like concrete. How bad? He's entering unstable territory. Mom sat down hard behind me. Dr. Levin stepped inside quietly after noticing her expression. Then he said something that changed the pressure completely. There's also another issue involving your father. Of course there was. What now? Dr. Levin hesitated. Yesterday afternoon, he attempted to remove Mateo from surgical authorization entirely. Mom gasped sharply behind us. He can't do that. He listed himself as secondary guardian advocate through old documentation. More forged systems, more hidden paperwork. How close was he? I asked quietly. Dr. Levin looked directly at me. Closer than he should have been. A chill moved through my entire body, because until that moment, part of me still framed this emotionally. Family betrayal, money, manipulation. Now it crossed into something else. Danger, real danger. Dr. Levin lowered his voice further. Alina, I'm going to be direct. I nodded slowly. If your father continues interfering, hospital legal may involve authorities before surgery proceeds. There it was. Police again. Not from me. From professionals. Mom whispered. Frank wouldn't hurt Mateo. Dr. Levin answered gently. I don't think he believes he is hurting him. That sentence destroyed something inside me. Because it sounded true. And truth hurts more than villainy. At 1:14 p.m., Vanessa arrived carrying printed financial records she pulled from Dad's garage filing cabinet. Credit cards. Loans. Second mortgages. Settlement withdrawals. The timeline stretched across 2 full years. Every worsening symptom Mateo experienced matched another financial crisis in my parents' life. Roof repairs, tax debt, Vanessa's divorce assistance, Dad's warehouse suspension, money disappearing while surgery kept moving further away. I stared at the papers across the dining room table while rain hit the window softly. Then I noticed one final document near the bottom. Guardianship contingency forms, signed 6 months earlier. My name listed beside crossed-out sections, Dad's name rewritten beneath. I looked up slowly. Mom saw it too, and turned pale instantly. "What is this?" she started shaking. I didn't know he filed those. The room suddenly felt ice cold, because now I understood the locked drawer completely. It was not hiding debt, not just forged records, it contained preparation. A full backup plan. If something happened to me legally or medically, Dad positioned himself to control Mateo's care entirely. Every lie suddenly looked larger, more deliberate, more permanent. And tomorrow morning, before surgery began, my father planned to make one final move. I just did not know what yet. Sunday lunch at my parents' house had always been mandatory, no matter how angry people were, no matter what happened during the week. My mother believed families survived by continuing rituals long after affection disappeared. At 12:03 p.m., I parked outside the house with Mateo asleep in the back seat after morning testing at Riverside. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., surgery preparation began. 20 hours left. I looked at the house for a long moment before waking him gently. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded sleepily. "Can I bring Tiger tomorrow?" "Of course." Inside the house, everything smelled normal again. Roast chicken, garlic, coffee. My mother cooked when terrified. Father Ben sat near the dining room, already holding a sweating glass of iced tea, Mrs. Delgados stood beside the kitchen island, arranging napkins while pretending not to notice tension. And Vanessa's fiancé, Eric, leaned awkwardly against the wall, checking his phone every 30 seconds. 3 witnesses, exactly what my father hated. Public scrutiny. He entered from the hallway carrying the locked drawer itself in both hands. Not files, the entire drawer removed from the desk. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then Dad placed it directly onto the dining room table. Heavy wood against polished oak thud. "You want answers?" he asked calmly. His calm frightened me more than shouting ever had. Mom looked horrified immediately. "Frank, no," he interrupted quietly. "We finished this today." Father Ben set down his glass slowly. Even he looked nervous now. I kept my voice steady. "Open it." Dad looked at Mateo first. "Go watch television in the den." "I'm staying," Mateo whispered. My chest tightened. Too much for a child. But before I could intervene, Dad nodded once. "Fine." That alone told me he no longer believed he could preserve appearances. He reached into his hat slowly and removed a brass key. Tiny. Ordinary. The kind of object capable of destroying entire families. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside sat 4 folders. Blue, red, yellow, black. Dad touched the black folder first. Then stopped. Like even now he wanted to choose which truth arrived first. "You all think this is about greed," he said quietly. Nobody answered. "Partly true," he admitted, "but not the important part." My pulse slowed strangely. Calm before impact. Dad opened the blue folder first and slid documents across the table. Settlement agreements, insurance notices, withdrawal records, $30,000 confirmed. Every witness stared silently. Mrs. Delgado whispered, "Jesus Christ." Dad ignored her. "I delayed surgery because I believed they exaggerated progression." "No," I said quietly. "You delayed surgery because you spent the settlement." He looked directly at me. Yes, the honesty landed harder than denial. Mom started crying softly beside the stove. Vanessa looked sick, but I already knew this part. Debt, money, cover-up, the false reveal. Dad opened the red folder next. Forged evaluations, copied signatures, revised urgency classifications, every ugly piece finally visible. Father Ben removed his glasses slowly. "Frank," he whispered, "this is criminal." Dad laughed once, tired. "You think I don't know that?" Then he looked at me again. "And still none of you understand the real problem." There it was. The final layer. My heartbeat became loud again. Dad touched the black folder carefully this time. His hands shook slightly. First genuine fear I had seen from him. Mom whispered immediately, "Don't." Dad ignored her. Then he opened it. Inside sat DNA results. Not hospital records, not insurance forms. DNA tests. My brain stalled for 1 full second. Dad slid the top page toward me. I saw Mateo's name first, then mine. Then another line beneath paternal match Glade. The room disappeared around me. "What?" Vanessa whispered. I stared at the paper without understanding it emotionally yet, only logically. Paternal match excluded. My father spoke softly now, too softly. The first cardiologist suggested inherited defects run through family bloodlines. I looked up slowly. Dad's eyes were wet, real tears, not performance. I tested myself, he whispered. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed loudly. You're not his grandfather, I said blankly. No. The word shattered something invisible. Mom covered her mouth violently. Father Ben looked stunned. Eric stopped recording on his phone without realizing he had started. Then the second realization hit, harder. If Dad was not Mateo's grandfather, then he knew something about Mateo's father. Something about me. What did you do? I whispered. Dad looked broken suddenly, not angry anymore, just old. I checked timelines. My stomach turned instantly. Vanessa stared between us in horror. No, Dad continued carefully. You were already pregnant before the wedding. I could not feel my hands. That's impossible. It isn't. No, my voice cracked finally. First time. Because I already knew. Deep down, tiny forgotten memories suddenly surfaced. The early delivery confusion. Different due dates. My ex-husband Adrian refusing genetic screening immediately after Mateo's birth. The constant fights afterward. And then Adrian leaving when Mateo turned 3. Not willingly. Like the note from the teacher story people whisper online, no worse, quietly, ashamed. Dad spoke again. Adrian knew. The room tilted. What? He found out during private testing. I stared at him blankly. He told me 2 years ago. 2 years. 2 entire years. You're lying. Dad slid another paper forward slowly. Paternity results. Adrian excluded. I stopped breathing correctly. Mom whispered my name repeatedly. Alina. But I barely heard her because now everything rearranged itself. The surgery delays, the forged records, the obsession. Dad wasn't only protecting money. He was protecting a secret capable of destroying the family publicly. He threatened to leave permanently, Dad whispered. Said once people learned Mateo wasn't his, insurance and custody complications would explode during treatment. No, I whispered. He was already gone emotionally. No, you begged him to stay. Tears blurred my vision instantly. Because that part was true. I remembered kneeling beside packed suitcases 4 years earlier. Adrian crying harder than I was, saying, I can't survive this. At the time, I thought he meant Mateo's illness. Now I knew better. You forged medical records to hide paternity? Vanessa asked in disbelief. Dad looked at her sharply. I forged records because once legal reviews reopened, older bloodwork discrepancies might trigger investigation. My body went cold. Bloodwork discrepancies, DNA markers, insurance files. Everything connected medically. Everything. Mrs. Delgado sat down heavily at the table, whispering prayers under her breath. Father Ben finally stood. Frank, you manipulated a child's treatment to hide family shame? Dad slammed his palm against the table suddenly. I was trying to hold this family together. The roar shook the room. Mateo flinched hard beside me. Instantly, Dad's face collapsed with regret. Too late. I pulled Mateo closer automatically. Then I asked the question still burning inside me. Who's his father? Silence. Dad looked away. Mom cried harder. Vanessa whispered, oh my God. And suddenly I understood the final horror. They knew. All of them knew. Or suspected enough. What I did not know yet was that the answer waiting inside that room would destroy the last safe memory I still had of my marriage. What happened next is not what I expected. And it is not what they expected either. Nobody answered my question. The silence itself became the answer. I looked from face to face slowly. Mom crying, Vanessa pale. Father Ben frozen beside the table. Eric still holding his phone loosely at his side. And my father staring at the floor like a man waiting for impact. Who, I repeated quietly, is Mateo's father? My voice barely sounded like mine anymore. Dad rubbed both hands over his face slowly. Then he whispered something I almost did not hear. We were never certain. The room exploded instantly. What? Vanessa shouted. I stood up so quickly my chair crashed backward. You destroyed my son's surgery over a guess? Dad looked up sharply. It wasn't a guess. Then say it. Mom suddenly screamed. Stop. Everyone froze. She looked shattered, not manipulative anymore. Not composed, destroyed. It happened once, she whispered. The sentence hit strangely. Soft, small, catastrophic. I stared at her blankly. What happened once? Mom looked toward my father with pure hatred suddenly, then back at me. Adrian's brother. The room tilted sideways. I physically grabbed the edge of the table. No, 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 Eric whispered, Jesus Christ. Vanessa covered her mouth hard enough to hurt herself. And suddenly old memories returned violently. A beach weekend 12 years earlier, too much tequila. Adrian leaving early Sunday morning for work. His younger brother Marcus staying behind another night. Fragments, laughter, music. Then nothing clear afterward, nothing I ever treated as real danger. I had buried it completely. My father spoke quietly now. Adrian found messages years later. I could barely hear him over the rushing in my ears. He tested Matteo privately. No, I whispered again. He confronted Marcus first. The room felt unreal, like overhearing strangers discuss someone else's life. When did you know? I asked. Dad swallowed hard. 2 years ago. 2 years. Again. Always 2 years. You let me live beside this for 2 years? Mom cried harder. We thought the marriage surviving mattered more. I laughed suddenly. Sharp, broken. My marriage already died. Nobody answered. Because everyone knew it was true. Adrian had left 4 years earlier and barely contacted Matteo afterward. I always blamed fear, stress, medical exhaustion. Now I understood his distance differently. Not hatred, humiliation. The kind men carry silently until it poisons everything. Then another realization hit. You blamed Matteo. Dad looked horrified instantly. No, yes, I whispered. Every delay, every forged form, every risk. You punished him because he reminded you. That's not true. But his voice weakened, which meant some part was true. Father Ben stepped forward slowly. Frank, you risked a child's life to protect appearances. I protected my daughter. No, I snapped quietly. You protected yourself. The room went silent again, because that was the real truth. Dad feared public shame more than consequences. Church reputation, family image, community gossip. The fundraiser itself suddenly looked monstrous now. A public performance covering a private collapse. Then Matteo spoke softly beside me. Mom, I turned immediately. His face looked confused. Why is everybody crying? My heart broke cleanly in half. I knelt beside him fast. Nothing's your fault, I whispered. Dad started crying then, actually crying. First time in my entire life I had seen it, and somehow that made everything worse. Because monsters are easy, broken fathers are harder. Then Eric quietly raised his phone. I recorded everything. Everyone looked at him sharply. Mom gasped. Dad looked furious instantly. You delete that right now. No, Eric answered calmly. Vanessa stared at him in shock. You recorded us. I started after the drawer opened. Good. For the first time all week I felt relief. Proof. Real proof. No more whispered revisions later. No more that's not what happened. Dad moved toward him quickly. I stepped between them immediately. Don't. The single word stopped him. Not fear, recognition. He finally understood control was gone. At that exact moment my phone rang. Dr. Levin, I answered automatically. Elena? His voice echoed loudly because speaker mode was still enabled from earlier. Yes, we need final surgical authorization now. Legal is involved because of the forged submissions. The entire room heard him, every word. Dr. Levin continued carefully, unaware of the audience. And one more thing. The DNA discrepancy connected to prior blood records surfaced during compliance review. The room froze again. Of course it had. Medical systems connected everything eventually. I closed my eyes briefly. What does that mean? It means your father's attempts to suppress reclassification likely accelerated legal discovery. Dad sat down heavily like his legs failed. For the first time, fear fully reached him. Not family fear, legal fear, professional fear. Dr. Levin lowered his voice. Elena, are you safe right now? I looked directly at my father, then answered. Yes. Another pause. We'll proceed tomorrow morning regardless of family interference. Security has been notified. Security. My father physically flinched. Because now strangers knew. Authorities knew. The private story became public record. After the call ended, nobody spoke for 30 seconds. Then Vanessa turned toward Dad slowly. You let everyone think I stole surgery money. Dad stared blankly ahead. You forged records. Silence. You stole settlement money. Silence again. And all of this started because you couldn't survive embarrassment? Finally, Dad whispered. You don't understand what public shame does to families. Mrs. Delgado stood abruptly. No, she snapped. You don't understand family. Even Father Ben looked stunned by her anger. She pointed directly at my father. That little boy could have died while you protected gossip. Dad's composure finally cracked completely. I was trying to buy time. For what? I asked quietly. His answer came instantly. For Adrian to come back. The truth landed horribly. Everything stopped. Even Mom looked shocked. Dad's voice shook now. I thought if surgery waited, if the family stabilized first, maybe he'd return. Delusion. Not strategy anymore, delusion. He risked Mateo's heart while fantasizing reconciliation could restore appearances before truth surfaced. And suddenly I saw the entire tragedy clearly. Dad was not protecting money. Not even reputation. He was trying to reverse reality itself. Undo shame, undo betrayal, undo abandonment. People become dangerous when they believe enough delay can change truth. Then Mateo asked the question that ended everything. Grandpa, do you still love me? Nobody breathed. Dad looked at him slowly and broke completely. Yes, he whispered instantly. More than anything. Mateo nodded once, then quietly said, then why were you okay if my heart stayed broken longer? Silence, pure silence. No defense survived that sentence. Not debt, not shame, not fear, nothing. My father lowered his face into both hands and sobbed. Real consequences had finally arrived. Not police, not lawsuits, a child understanding betrayal. And that was the moment I knew our family would never recover from this room. Mateo's surgery lasted 6 hours and 14 minutes. I know because I counted everyone. Hospitals teach people strange forms of time. Minutes stop feeling abstract there. Every passing second sounds mechanical, measured, expensive at 5:43 a.m. Monday morning, security escorted my father from Riverside Children's Hospital before surgery prep began. He did not resist. That mattered to me later. Because for the first time since this started, he stopped trying to control outcomes. Mom texted me 3 times during prep. I love you, please answer. Your father is not okay. I never replied. At 11:08 a.m., Dr. Levin entered the waiting room still wearing surgical scrubs and removed his mask slowly. That moment lives inside me permanently. Every parent who has waited outside operating rooms knows the terror of watching a doctor search for words. Then he smiled. Small, tired, real, successful, he said. My legs nearly gave out. Vanessa caught my arm before I fell. I cried hard for exactly 40 seconds, then stopped. Not because I was calm, because Mateo still needed me functional afterward. That became my entire personality for a while. Functional. Police contacted me Tuesday afternoon. Hospital legal filed reports connected to forged submissions, insurance interference, and unauthorized medical representation. I answered questions for 2 hours, dates, transfers, documents, voicemails. The detective kept pausing before certain questions like he could feel how personal the answers were becoming. He finally asked quietly, did your father ever intend physical harm toward your son? I answered honestly, no, and I meant it. That complicated everything. Because evil would have been easier. Cruelty would have been cleaner. But my father loved Mateo genuinely. He just loved control, reputation, and denial too. And eventually those things demanded sacrifices. Families rarely collapse from one giant decision. Usually it happens through tiny permissions. One lie tolerated, one delay excused, one silence repeated until it becomes structure. Marcus called Wednesday night. First time in 3 years. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered silently. He cried before speaking. I didn't know, he whispered immediately. I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Did Adrian know for sure? Yes. The word hurt even though I expected it. When? After the second DNA test. Second. Meaning Adrian wanted the first one wrong. That destroyed me quietly. He didn't leave because of Mateo, Marcus continued. He left because every time he looked at him, he hated himself for still loving him anyway. I covered my mouth hard. Some grief arrives years late. That was mine. Why didn't anyone tell me? Marcus laughed bitterly. Because your father threatened to bury me publicly if I destroyed the marriage. Of course he did. Another delay, another secret, another attempt to freeze reality before consequences arrived. Marcus whispered, I'm sorry. I believed him. That was the tragedy again. Nobody inside this story felt fully evil anymore. Just weak, cowardly, broken in different directions. 3 weeks later, Dad accepted a plea agreement. No prison time due to cooperation, age, lack of prior offenses, and the hospital's focus on financial restitution rather than incarceration. Probation, financial penalties. Permanent restrictions involving medical advocacy documentation. Public church resignation. That last part destroyed him most. People whispered at St. Agnes afterward. Not loudly, quietly, the dangerous kind. Mrs. Delgado told me half the congregation already suspected something strange during the fundraiser. Humans always sense rot before truth surfaces. They just avoid naming it. Mom moved into a small apartment near the river after selling the Linden Street house with Dad. I visited once, only once. She looked smaller there, like guilt physically shrank her. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope. I almost burned this, she admitted. Inside sat an unsent letter from Adrian dated 3 years earlier. The handwriting shook badly. I still love Matteo. I just don't know how to survive this without hating everyone involved. I sat in my car afterward reading that sentence repeatedly while rain hit the windshield. Not because it healed anything, because it explained something. People think betrayal kills love instantly. Usually it does not. Usually love survives long enough to suffer first. Matteo recovered slowly, painfully, but successfully. By winter, he could run short distances without stopping every 30 seconds to breathe. The first time I saw him sprint across a playground without clutching his chest, I cried in my car afterward where he could not see me. Well, children deserve futures larger than family secrets. I still think about the fundraiser sometimes. The balloon sinking slowly near the church ceiling. My mother crying while asking strangers for donations. My father grilling burgers outside while forged paperwork sat hidden in his office drawer. And Vanessa hugging me beside her suitcase whispering, "I love Matteo." The terrifying part is this. All of them meant what they said. That is why I stayed silent longer than I should have. That is why I almost accepted the vacation story. That is why I kept searching for explanations instead of truth. Because love existed inside the betrayal. Real love. Distorted by fear until it became dangerous. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I never opened the account history that night. If I trusted them one more week. One more form. One more delay. Maybe nothing changed. Maybe everything did. I know this. Secrets do not stay buried because they are powerful. They stay buried because the people protecting them still look familiar, still sound loving, still hand you coffee while lying directly to your face. Last month, Matteo asked if Grandpa could come watch his school concert. I went silent too long before answering. Then finally asked, "Do you want him there?" Matteo thought carefully. Children are wiser than adults sometimes. "Yes," he said, "but only if he tells the truth now." I looked out the kitchen window for a long time after that, because in the end, that was the only thing any of us ever wanted. Not perfection, not even forgiveness, just truth before the damage became permanent. And for my son, thankfully, it arrived barely in time.